Hey, good morning, Hope. My name is Davis. If I haven't had the chance to meet you yet, one of the pastors here at our downtown location. This was too tall for you, Brooke. It's just like the perfect height for me. It was blocking you a little bit, but it's the right height for me. Low church. We're low church here. This means it's a carpool Sunday. It was hard to get here this morning, and we want to thank you for your efforts. We also want to say, hey, if you're newer here and you didn't park in one of the spots right here in yellow or in the ramp, at some point within the next 2 to 5 minutes, just quietly stand up, go and move your car to one of these places in yellow or the ramp, and we won't even ask questions. We'll just think you went to go get coffee. That's one logistics note. The other one is, if you see someone today in that hospitality shirt, that red hospitality shirt, would you give them a hug or a high five? Because they came in here on a carpool Sunday without working hot water for your coffee and tea, and they have been running to go get it. They went to Starbucks, they went to Spy Hot, I'm just kidding. But they did go to the other building and make coffee for you, so give them a hug. That is the logistics for you this morning. We have been in a series so far, kicking off, called Half Truths. And most of the time we spend this time opening up God's Word, looking at a book in the Bible and kind of taking it verse by verse. But every now and then, we like to kind of interrupt that flow and address some topics to hear what God might be saying about 21st century questions. And this series has been looking into 7 of those questions. 7 of the ways that we have some type of truth within us that we're kind of like, yeah, this is right, correct? But then when you double click on it, you go, wait, maybe this doesn't actually hold water. Like last week when Pastor Core showed us, love can't equal agreement. That's not the purpose of what love is. Love really manifests, especially in the midst of disagreement. Today's half-truth was visualized for me this summer in a way that I just was like, this is insane. I can't tell if I absolutely love this concept for a show or am utterly horrified by its existence. I'm talking about the show, The Rehearsal. Has anybody seen this show? It's on the HBOs. And Nathan Fielder is that guy right there holding a computer with his little tray that goes around his shoulders. And if it looks like he's spying on these 2 gentlemen talking, he's not. This is actually arranged. The man on your right there is an actor who's practicing a difficult conversation that the man on the left wants to have with his brother. And you can hire Nathan Fielder for no small amount of money to run through all of the possibilities of how that conversation might go. Isn't this insane? But at the same time, you're like, I kind of want this. I'm having a tough conversation coming up. And Nathan will print for you a 10, 20, 50, 80-page decision-making tree flow of all the things that could happen in this conversation. He goes as far as recreating the bar in a warehouse that some of these conversations are going to take place, so his clients can feel what it's like to be in that environment. And then Nathan will just throw him curveballs. Like, what if the waiter interrupts you while you're about to get to the punchline of the thing you want to share? This show had me dumbfounded in the way that this man tried to predict all of the unpredictable moments that come with being a human being. And not only having conversations, but all of the things that create fear and awkward moments and a sense of, I'm just not in control here. This show double-clicked for me in a hyperbolic way on this 21st century need, this craving, this absolute desire that all of us have for control and the fears that are underneath them. So today's half-truth is control is the goal. And I don't think we're printing out the decision trees like Nathan's clients are. But I do think that control is a thing that undergirds a lot of the ways that we make decisions and the ways we navigate our world around us. This is coming from a guy who, even in double clicking on these topics, I was like, I am hungry for control in so many areas of my life. And so this is where I want us to go this morning as we dissect this half-truth. To begin, what are we talking about? With control as a goal, what does that actually mean? What is control? And how's that working for us? For all of the half-truths in this series, rather than just coming over the top and being like, that's wrong, here's the truth. We want to go, what's the kernel of truth behind this? Like, why is this so enticing to so many of us? From there, we can maybe go, how's this working? How is this playing out in our life? And what's so fascinating is our attempts to, like Nathan was doing with his clients, just wrap your arms around the unpredictable nature of life is backfiring in so many ways. And it is fascinating to dig into them and just kind of think of them. Like, how are we doing in the midst of our age of trying to have control? And then lastly, I want to land on the only antidote that I think is possible for control. And I want to use this book throughout. This book was a book I accidentally stumbled into on sabbatical this summer. It's by my new favorite sociologist. I've mentioned him before from this pulpit. His name is Hartmut Rosa. He is a German sociologist who, in his research, tries to do things that I don't think any American sociologist would be bold enough to take on. Because usually we're so, like in America, we have like one specialized thing that you can really zoom in on. But what Rosa is doing is he's zooming out and kind of going like, my theory here for the way the world works encapsulates all of your life, like the way you live and move through the world. And his big topic of study is this subject called resonance, which we'll get to in a little bit. But before that, he accidentally wrote this book. Like he couldn't help but writing this book called The Uncontrollability of the World. And this word, uncontrollability, it's a fascinating word. It's not one we use a lot. And it's not one that he actually intended to write out. He wrote it in German, and it began with this word. Like in German, I'm not actually going to try to pronounce that, because then I'll probably swear in church on accident. So that word is what the book is called. And at first, his editor first began with like, well, how about unpredictability? That's usually how it's translated. And he's like, it's not quite right. Well, how about non-availability? No, non-engineerability. Like the world cannot be engineered no matter how much we try. He's like, it's close, but it's not right. And then he landed on this word, uncontrollability. Because in that word, you just feel this like, yeah, I can't quite control the categories of my life. And Rosa goes on to say, this book is about modernity's incessant desire to make the world engineerable, predictable, available, accessible, disposable. That's where we're again, in all its aspects. You hear that? Our undergirding desire to make the world just like, I got this. I can predict what's going to happen next. I can make a chart. Like literally make a chart about how people are going to respond when I do X. And if I put in the right inputs, I will get the right outputs for so many categories of my life. And here's his hypothesis. And I wonder if it resonates with you like it did me. My hypothesis is this, Rosa says, because we, as late modern human beings, aim to make the world controllable at every level. Think about it. In your individual life, at a cultural level, at an institutional level within the institutions we work for or go to school at, and structural, we invariably encounter the world as a series of points of aggression. Do you feel that? Do you encounter the world as a series of things that you have to work against? He goes on to describe, in other words, as a series of objects that we have to know. It's a series of objects we have to attain, conquer, master, or exploit. And precisely because of this, life, as we experience it, the experience of feeling alive and of truly encountering the world, that which makes resonance possible, which again, we'll get into resonance a little bit later, but that which makes you just like, I am alive, like this is why I was made, always seems to elude us. Like when you and I try to control the world, make it knowable, accessible, bring it within reach, predict what's going to happen next, there's this strange thing that happens, and it's, in Rosa's words, uncontrollability. There's this feeling of like, I'm not able to experience life as it's intended to be, and I'm constantly striving, but it continues to elude me. Know, attain, conquer, master, or exploit. This is what trying to control the world looks like. How do you like to do these things in your life? How do you seek to control your surroundings? Do you have apps on your phone like I do? Where we try to Okay, we're not gonna try to control them, but we're just gonna measure stuff. All right, top row. We're just gonna measure the temperature. We're gonna play with it a little bit. We're gonna get some screens on our apps that show us the outside of our house. We're just looking at it so that when Amazon delivers, I know when Amazon delivers. Or if an intruder comes, I'll talk to him and say, don't do it. That'd be bad. I got it, right? Like I'm measuring this. All right, how about the second row? Todoist, Notion, Rescue Time. What if we were able to just kind of track our to-do lists? We're not trying to control it, we're just tracking them, right? There's a feeling though, like the moment you start to track it, don't you feel that temptation? Don't you feel that seduction of just like, I could optimize it, I could make it better, I could control all the things that I'm gonna have to do at work this week by just putting them into these apps. How about the third row there? We have Headspace, Calm, Happify. Okay, so now we're operating at the level of emotions, and we're able to measure now our moods. Okay, and then on the last row, what if we were able to master our sleep? What if we just started tracking it, and then we were able to master it? Like, we just started with tracking, but now we're mastering. And you and I who have these apps, we're like, I'm not trying to do that, man. I'm just trying to keep track of these things. Do you know that Better Sleep's big idea is like the moment you start with us, 4 weeks later, not even 4 months, 4 weeks later, look at you. You started with frizzy hair today, right now, because you're not sleeping. But soon you'll have your hand out like this and the sun will shine on you because you monitored your sleep and then you optimized it. You have the power to control your natural bodily rhythms. Wow, what a time to be alive. I think Roast is onto something here. I think we want to know it first. Like we start with I'm just tracking. But then the minds in Silicon Valley are like, but you can control it. Like once you track it, you have full control over this. Or how about Rescue Time? That was one I hadn't heard of this week. That was on the to-do list app there. This is their slogan. Take back control of your time. They're not even hiding this from you. You have the ability now to control all of these things in your life. And we didn't even get into half the apps. The ones that actually we commonly use probably more than others. How about Waze? Any Waze users out there? Waze is like a Google Maps replacement, but it goes, you have the power. You don't have to sit in traffic anymore like those common fools. I will show you the way. Blowing through 9 stop signs through a school zone, over a cul-de-sac, and killing 2 cats, but you'll get there. 4 minutes faster. So you can do this on your phone because you're in control now. You got this. You got 4 minutes back in your life. Fascinating. Where does this come from? Where does this need to control come from? Well, like many of these topics, we always say, you got to go back to the beginning. Like when you find a desire in you, here's what you need to know about your desires. And all of us are just brimming with desire constantly. It's what kind of drives your life. When you encounter a desire within you, it has a genesis. It has a beginning. It has a start. And God's word begins with that title. It begins in Genesis. And in Genesis 1, before sin enters the world, we see the kernel of truth of control, like where this actually came from. It came from the place where God designed us. He designed us to be in his image, and he designed us to be able to rule, to have a measure of, I can predict what's going to happen here, and I can rule over these things. The theological word is dominion, and it comes about in Genesis 1 as a description of what it means to be made in the image of God. God says, this is the Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit talking, and he says, let us. That's why the us is there. God the Father, Son, and Spirit are saying, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule. There it is. This is where that kernel of truth comes from. Like, why do we want control so bad? Because God wired you to rule, to have dominion over your surroundings. You are the pinnacle of God's creation, and he made you with the ability to rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the air, over the livestock. There's your job, and all the wild animals. Dog lovers in the room are like, somehow teach me. I still haven't mastered my dog. And over all the creatures that move along the ground. So here it is. God designed you to have dominion. And that desire for control, again, it finds, like every desire, it's this echo of Eden. It's this, like, oh, I was made for something. Like my creator made me some way. And I want that. I want to go back to that. So wait, are you saying that every desire we have is good? No. But every desire we have does find a good kernel of truth. I'll stand by that. Evil has, of course, gotten involved in every level of our desires. But at the beginning, these desires were good and true. And evil itself is not like a thing that comes in and is like good versus evil. It's more like a hole in a sock. So all of your desires are the sock, and evil is this thing that comes along and makes a hole in it, changes it, corrupts it. And after sin enters the world, but 10 chapters after we read Genesis 1, we see how control has taken this like turn. It's become this half-truth. It's become this thing that God didn't originally intend. Like the way that God had dominion was that you'd be working with him in the garden, discovering him, seeing more about the world he made as a means of driving closer and closer to the Father, knowing him like a spiral. Like you would get closer and closer to the way he is because you're encountering the world that he made and ruling over it in his name, that he might get more glory. But 10 chapters later, after sins enter the world and you're kind of wondering like, how bad was it that they ate the fruit? Things move from bad to worse to Genesis 11, when human beings totally rebel against God. They were of one language, and then they said, you know what? What if we took that rule that we just feel within us, that desire for control, and we just said, we just don't need him anymore. Like, what if we gathered our resources, pooled them, and said, let's build a tower to the heavens? We got this. I think we'll be all right. I think we'll be good. Genesis 11, 1 and 4. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. Then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. There it is. Did you catch it? Dominion that God gave as a gift has now like turned a little bit into something that looks more like my domain. I will make a name for myself. It's not about his name, it's about me. I am going to get the approval of God by what I do. I'm going to be in control of my surroundings. I don't even need him. Let's make a name for ourselves, which is ironic because they already had a name. They were made in the name of God, made in the image of him. But we don't need that. Let's make it for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth, which was God's good design, that we would do that. So interesting. Genesis 1, we move to Genesis 11. AI's help shows us a little bit of what that looks like. I don't think either of these are too accurate. Genesis 11 is a little closer. Genesis 1 has way too many people and the birds from Lord of the Rings. Are those flying? Those are the eagles? They look up there. Don't see that in the text as much. But Genesis 11 is pretty accurate. Dark doom storm, right? Like, oh, they're building the tower. And then you got that like Ford semi. Timing gets confusing when you're artificially intelligent. I think there's just but the visual is helpful, okay? You had dominion to my domain via my Ford. It's amazing. Approval, significance, security. God gave me this desire. It's been corrupted. I've twisted it. It's about me now, getting to the heavens apart from God. Rosa, again, is helpful here about what this looks like in Genesis 11. He's not commenting on Genesis 11. He's not doing a theological project. He's doing a sociological one. And yet underneath it, we see so much of the foundations that the Bible speaks of. It's fascinating. This tremendously powerful idea that the key to a good life, think about that for a second. How would you answer that question right now? What's a good life? Like what does it look like? What does it consist of? He says the key to a good life, a better life, lies in expanding our share of the world. This has arisen as a cultural outcome, working its way deep into the tiniest pores of our psychological and emotional life. Like having a good life means like expanding our share of the world. Our life will be better if we manage to bring more world within our reach. This is the mantra of modern life. Unspoken, but relentlessly reiterated and reified in our actions and behaviors. Whoa. He's getting real close here. I felt pinned to the wall by this section of the book. Always act in such a way that your share of the world is increased. Do you feel that pull? Always act in such a way that your share of the world is increased. This has become the dominant principle behind our decision making in all areas of life and across all ages, from toddlers to the elderly. Always act in such a way that your share of the world, you can bring more within reach, and your decision making matrix, your moral decision making factors, how much are they fueled by that? Don't you just feel that constant, like which job should I take? Well, which ones are going to open up more doors for you in the future? Bringing more of the world within your reach. So many categories of this comes up in our lives. Where do you see it? All over the place. Let me give you 4. I limited myself to 4, and that one I just said about the job doesn't count, okay? I get 4. Let me give you 4 examples of what he's describing here, of just like, the good life is me attaining more reach on the world, bringing it under my control. Entertainment, satisfaction in life, our presence, our spiritual lives, and our mental health. Those are the 4 categories I want to look at, right? The first one, enjoyment. Just our enjoyment of the world around us via entertainment. Here's the scene. You just finished a long week of work. You and your roommates, you and your family, you're sitting down, it's pizza night. You're just like, let's pull out the television. We're gonna watch something family. We're gonna watch something friends. We're gonna watch something roommates. We're gonna watch something self. I'm just alone. Whatever it is. You're pulling that up. You got the catalog of your subscription services. You've paid for 1. You have access to 9. I don't need to know how you did that. You have more of the world's reach of movies and entertainment now than human beings have ever had. And you sit down to select one, and you're gonna confidently navigate through those 9 subscription services and arrive at the movie that all the people wanna watch, and you're gonna be happy about it. You're gonna press play and be like, we chose it. We chose the right one for tonight. We all feel that, we're all good, we're all in agreement. No, the moment you pull this up, it's like the cereal aisle on steroids. You're like, I thought I knew what I wanted. I have no idea what. And then you choose one, and then someone's like, oh, you didn't ask me. Or you, with the remote, are like, this is a stupid choice. Why are we watching this? This constant pull that Blockbuster didn't have a problem at. You would go for 2 hours, you'd scan them, and you'd choose like 1 or 2 movies. You'd watch them 3 times, and you were like, that was a great movie. Full experience, happy about that one. Now you have control over all of them. And your enjoyment of it has gone down. We can agree, your enjoyment of these movies have gone down, even though you're spending more hours watching this. I am too. Spotify's the same thing. You're driving on the road, you're like, all right, I got it all. I got all the music. We're gonna listen to the one that popped up that I listened to last time because I don't wanna think about what to listen to. Spotify's aware of this. Did you catch they did an AI DJ now? Has that happened to you? You log in and they're like, we know you don't want the control. Let us be in control again. We'll choose the music for you. It's wild. Our enjoyment of these things has decreased. How about our presence? Like when we're with people, we're in a moment, we have more control, more access, more ability to contain a moment than we ever have. A phone in our pocket that can always capture, videotape, so we can go back and experience that feeling again. In 1998, here's Michael Jordan, the GOAT, the real GOAT, of all-time basketball, hitting the game winner in Game 6. And look at the fans. They're so present as they're watching the greatest basketball player in history hit this shot. It's being cemented in history. It's being cemented in their brains. They're looking at it. They're seeing it with their eyes. Somebody in LeBron's last season took this photo and set it next to LeBron hitting the shot that surmounted him, that etched him into stone in all time as the one who scored more points. He surpassed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in this moment. And it's the same, right? Everyone's just present, they're there. They're so just like ingesting no, there's one guy who doesn't have his device in front of his eyes looking at the scene. No phones out, all phones out. That's how these photos have been labeled. And it's fascinating. Because we do this all the time. You might not be at the sporting event, but you're at a concert, right? You're like, this is amazing. And you hold this up in front of you. And do you know they've done stuff like your brain actually goes, I'm gonna take a smoke break. You're gonna film it. I'm not gonna be present anymore because you'll remember this. We'll watch it again or experience it for the first time. I'm like The biggest, I do this more than anyone, I think, when I'm at a con. I'm just like, yep, we're going to remember this one. And then I look at it maybe the next morning, one of the 8 videos I shot, never again, right? Don't we all do this? How many photos do you have on your phone? You're going to go through them? Come on. 10,000 plus. I'm confessing to you. I have that on my phone. I'm not going to look at an 1/8 of those over the course of my life. But if I capture the moment, I can contain it. I can make it mine. My presence is reduced. How about spiritually? Very famous scene when Peter talks to Jesus. Jesus tells him the gospel in advance. This is the thing that I've come to do. This is why God, the one who made you, the one who said you're going to be made in my image, I'm going to give you dominion. Everything has run amok so bad since I first did that and you guys turned away from me. I've come to earth to remedy this situation. And this incessant desire that you now have for control and making a name for yourself, the only way to cure this is for me to die for you. And Jesus says that to him. He says it to his disciples. He says in Matthew 16, from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests and the teachers of the law. And that he must, here it is, be killed. And on the 3rd day be raised to life, okay? So the Gospels are not an easy read. Before this moment, even in particular, Jesus is like, you're really hard to pin down, man. Like you're saying, blessed are the poor, but then you're saying be perfect, which again, we'll dive into as a half-truth in the series. But from the moment that he really starts talking about his death, the parables get a little bit less frequent and things just begin to be more clear. And he just starts to go like, I really need you to pay attention to this. This is the whole reason I'm here. And then Peter, like a good 21st century American, is like, I have such a better plan for you, God. I work in PR and like we're good, dude. Like that's a nice strat. It's a choice, but I have a better strategy that looks like rather than dying and going down, what if we just continue to like assemble followers and have power and go to the masses? Like we'll get your message out. And that's when Jesus goes, no, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, and you do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. Then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up the cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever will lose their life for me will find it. Peter tried to control God like a child. Bad Jesus, we're not doing that. Now we can read this story and remove ourselves from Peter pretty easily and be like, God's never called me Satan. I think I'm doing okay. And I've never tried to really control God. You know, like maybe when I was younger, I tried to like pray the right prayers and stuff, but I don't do that anymore. I think we do. I think our spirituality looks like Peter's a lot of the time. Anytime we start to click into that mindset, if I put in the right inputs and get the right outputs, we're starting to look like what Peter's doing here. If I do the right things, if I go to the right number of churches, if I read the right amount of Bible, if I do that, then God will do this. This is a means of controlling God. The uncontrollable creator of all things. We try to control him. Or how about one that I want to share because it's me. It's the thing that I struggle with. The sense of, maybe you've done this too, of like you have a decision to make and you go, well, I'm just going to pray about it until I get a sense of peace. Because that will mean that God is telling me to do that thing. Right? It's like, that sounds pretty compelling. I mean, at least you're kind of going to God and he's going to do this. Where are we promised that when it comes to our decisions, God is going to dispense to you a sense of peace based on you coming to him? If anything, we have the scriptures saying the opposite. Like the will of God often creates like an inner turmoil and sense of like, this is really hard, but God's at work and I'm going to trust him and follow him even though it really doesn't feel good in the moment. But I'm often like, but peace would be nice, man. I'd like to control God a little bit with this, like, I'll pray this and you give me peace and all right, we're cool. Behind that is, I think I'm going to control God in my decision making. Where is it for you? Where are you prone to want to control God? Like me, like Peter, like many other examples we might see in the scriptures. Enjoyment, presence, spirituality. How about our just mental well-being? A Surgeon General warning comes out when there's enough data that says this thing is bad for your health. And they put a big sticker on the thing that's being sold to the public, and they say, just so you know, you're buying this and it can harm you. We've done the research, we have the facts. They're gonna put it on stuff, right? I think it was Kaylin on our staff who notified us that the surgeon did this past week. They put another sticker, printed them out, Surgeon General warning. Do you know what they put it on? They put it on parenting. The Surgeon General released a warning this last week that parenting is potentially harmful for your health. And when she told us, we all responded the way you just did. You're like, this is not real. This is an Onion article. This cannot be possibly true. But when you Google it, it comes up. The surgeon, in fact, totally released a warning on parenting that it will cause a level of stress in your life that has not actually been reached in previous generations of parenting. And when you read it, it actually changes that kind of, like I just had this, no way is this real. This is real. Where are you gonna put the sticker? I can't even say that from the pulpit, of where you're gonna put, I just know. But when you read it, it's fascinating, it's illuminating, and it actually breeds a degree of compassion in what's happening right now at the level of expectations for parenting. Of course, rising costs for your kids, if you're gonna be in daycare, expectations of both parents to be working in order to, again, financially be solvent and okay. But then the interesting one for me was reading about the expectations around information. Parents right now in this moment are supposed to know more than they ever have about what is good and what is bad. And they're being preached at more than they ever have. Access to not only these things, but scholarly articles on any topic or issue. Choose the hot button ones if you want. Choose the normal ones, like, what should I feed my kid today? And it's like, well, if you feed them this, you're actually going to go to purgatory. And it's like, I didn't even know there was a parenting purgatory. There is. I had a joke, but I'm not gonna say it. What is it? You just leave it to mystery. The Surgeon General warning cites the fact that 2 out of 5 parents right now, parenting has always been hard, parenting has always been stressful, but the reason the surgeon was like, no, we actually mean this, is because 2 out of 5 parents right now say they are overwhelmed to the point of just feeling numb. Like on the inside, there's just a sense of just like, I have nothing here and I have nothing left to give. There's nothing. Back to Rosa on this. He says, this cultural promise of making the world controllable not only does not work, but in fact, it becomes distorted into its exact opposite, just like what's happening to parents, just like what's happening to us in the moment, just like what's happening to us spiritually and what's happening to us in our enjoyment. The scientifically, technologically, economically, and politically controllable world that we're all trying to create mysteriously seems to elude us or to close itself off from us. It withdraws from us, becoming mute and unreadable. Here's the description of what that feels like. Everything out there is dead, gray, empty, and cold. And everything within me is mute and numb too. Just like what was cited in the Surgeon General warning. Everything out there is just dark and cold, and everything within me is just numb. I got nothing. The world is falling mute. He goes on, speaking of burnout, which is a topic that you hear all the time at work. It's a topic you read about a lot, and it's a topic that you're afraid of. For good reason, especially those of us who've experienced it. Rosa says this about burnout. It's not the frequency of the diagnosis, for which there may be many different reasons, that strikes me as significant here. But the fact that even those who are not objectively threatened by either burnout or depression are nevertheless obsessively interested in this phenomena and perceive it to be a threat. You and I do this, right? Like, oh, I don't want to get burnt out. I don't want to take on too much. I don't want to get burnt out. It's a fear. My hypothesis is that the fundamental fear of modernity is fear of the world's falling mute, of which burnout and depression are only a timely and perhaps heightened expression. Again, Rosa's phrase there, everything out there is dead, gray, empty, and cold, and everything within me is mute and numb too. You're either experiencing this in the uncontrollable world that we're trying to control, or you're afraid of experiencing this. And this is why we thirst. This is why we want control over our immediate surroundings. What then will fix our current predicament? What will cure, what will melt that frozen, cold, mute, dark gray world. Well, the only antidote, of which Rosa is a proponent of, even in the book, and this is his major topic of research, is resonance. That you would actually engage the world, not aggressively, not trying to subsume everything under you and control it and constantly bring everything more within your reach, but instead that you would practice resonance. Think of like a tuning fork, I think is a helpful analogy. It's a big topic for Rosa as he tries to describe this. He's written a really dense academic book on it, but I'm gonna give it to you in 37 seconds, so you're gonna master it. It's this. The tuning fork that you use to just create a sound, if you hold another tuning fork by, tuning fork B next to tuning fork A after you've struck it, tuning fork B will produce a sound that it can't produce on its own, but it's simply responding to this greater noise that's being made. That's resonance, okay? At a musical level. That's about as far as my musical prowess will go. And I did Google it before this talk this morning. But that's resonance, okay? That's what it looks like. But what does that look like in real life? If you noticed on the cover of the book, it was a picture of just like the first real blizzard of the year. Something that's coming our way in for Minnesotans. He says, remember what that was like the first time that happened? Go back as far as you can in your brain to that first snowfall. Just the objective wonder that you were experiencing the first time white little fluffy things fell from the sky and covered the earth, completely transforming your surroundings. This unexpected gift from above that cannot be predicted. Any Minnesotan's gonna go, it's very true. We've seen the people try. Is there gonna be a blizzard? You're gonna tell me how much it's gonna snow? 15 inches, great. I'm gonna prepare for that. It didn't snow, man. What's up with this, right? It can't be predicted, at least not well. It can't be manufactured in a way that produces that same resonant effect. Here's what resonance looks like. Something greater than you is calling out to you specifically. That's the first step. This great tuning fork A does something, and you feel specifically reached out to. And in this reaching, this responding, I'm a part of a world that's filled like you were when you saw the first snowfall. There is a wonder. There is a transformation that begins to happen from outside of you. Something that you did not cause, but you just encountered like the tuning fork. And the most important ingredient of this resonance is that it's completely uncontrollable. You cannot cause it or engineer it. It's simply something that happens to you. I think Rosa is nailing this as an antidote to our desire for control. That if you just for a moment just say, what if I didn't just try and aggressively tackle the world and just achieve and optimize and become all that I want to be. But instead, I just took note of the fact that I am a creature created by God who's called to respond to him and be transformed by him. Be transformed by him, like Romans 12 says. We see this when Matthew first gets called in Matthew 9. As Jesus went from there, right, he's just walking along doing his ministry. He saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. So he's a guy that we're just like, not a fan by most people at the time. And do you know what he says to him? He just says two words. He says, follow me. And Matthew goes, well, I have questions. Are you gonna enhance my career? No, he does none of that. All we're told in Matthew 9 is that Matthew gets up from his job and he's like, okay. And he just follows him. And he continues to follow him. Here we have this picture of resonance, right? There's this first force, this tuning fork A, that just goes, follow me. And somehow it strikes Matthew, this tuning fork B, and he goes, okay. And what's so fun for us is that we have the scriptures that show like what happens after this moment when Jesus extends this hand to Matthew and says, follow me. Two words from the mouth of God uttered in a way that utterly transforms Matthew and continues to transform him throughout. For those of you who are believers in the room, this has happened to you. Like the God of the universe has stooped down and like the extended hand in Caravaggio's painting here, mimicked that Michelangelo painting of God and said, follow me. And maybe you didn't even know that that's what was being uttered to you. Like for me, it took me like 2 years. It felt like a light dimmer, just kind of getting brighter and brighter and brighter until I was like, oh, it's Jesus. He's the one behind this call. And if you're still following him, it's because he's continuing to say it. He's saying, follow me, and I will be this act of transformation in your life. And you are so far from control of what's happening. I mean, it's in the words, follow me. Not, hey, let's go create, it's follow me. I'm leading. For Matthew, there was a big question mark on where he was leading. Where was he going? Even though we had just read, right, in Matthew 16, this is where I'm going. I'm going to die. In the midst of the chaos and uncontrollability of the world, the reason I'm here is I am intervening as God into the setting which you cannot control or fix or optimize your way out of, the pit that you were in. I'm coming to do that for you, specifically through my death and my resurrection. It's the ultimate act of uncontrollable transformation. And God continues to speak it again and again and again in a way that's inviting, in a way that's resonating, and it never looks the same. Like the gospel always has something new to speak directly into your heart, mind, and circumstances. This is God's plan A. And right after he dies, right after this event, we have the book of Acts, which is a narrative of what happens after. And Peter, the guy who first tried to control God, finally gets it through his thick skull, like you and I so often struggle. And here's what he says to a group of onlookers. He says, listen, Israelites, my people, listen to this. Jesus of Nazareth was a man accredited by God to you by miracles, wonders, and signs, which God did among you through him, as you yourselves know. This man was handed over to you by God's deliberate plan. This is what he always had in mind since the garden, is that he would be handed over to death. The one who's in control was always planning to do this for you. His deliberate plan and foreknowledge. And you, with the help of wicked men, put him to death by nailing him to the cross. But God raised him from the dead, freeing him from the agony of death because it was impossible for death to keep its hold on him. Fascinating. David, he goes on. David, the guy in the Old Testament, writes about this in the Psalms. Listen to the resonance of these words. Listen to the way that they're constantly calling out, just like follow me, just like the gospel's constantly reaching out. David says, I saw the Lord always before me. Because he is at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Therefore, my heart is glad and my tongue rejoices. My body also will rest in hope. Because you will not abandon me to the realm of the dead. You will not let your Holy One see decay. You have made known to me the paths of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence. David didn't know he was writing about Jesus here. But you and I have the ability now to look back and go, of course he is. Do you hear this? Do you hear the language of the good life? Constant paths of life that include joy being given to you, responding as tuning fork B, as the God of the universe reaches out and calls you specifically and says, let me be your agent of transformation. Friends, the good life is not you and I reaching our arms around more and more of this world that's going to decay. The good life is Christ and him crucified. At his right hand is joy forevermore, and he is constantly speaking and inviting you into a resonant relationship with him. One that he's in charge and he's in the lead, and we get to joyfully follow and experience. Well, what then does this look like practically? It looks a lot like Ezra Jack Keats' book, The Snowy Day. Any readers, any fans of this one? Love this book. The childlike wonder of him experiencing his first snowfall. Just like we were talking, like what does resonance actually look like? It's like this book. Like every time he's going to a new place, he's just like, what? There are footprints behind me in this stuff? This is the coolest. But then in the book, he does what we all do with this life. There's this moment where he's like, yeah, all right, I'm going to take some of this home. And he makes a little snowball and he slips it into his pocket and he goes into his warm house for a bath and soup. And then he goes back to his jacket, and what does he find? The snowball is not intact anymore. The moment he tried to wrap his arms around that resonant experience, it just dissipated through his fingers. Yesterday's grace was not meant to be the supply of today. Jesus is still leading. Jesus is still following. And for this kid, he's a picture of that. He's a picture of all of us who are trying to put the snow into our pocket. But then he goes to sleep, dreams about it being gone, but wakes up and finds what? There's new gifts, new grace. something new for us each and every day that's meant to stir us, following Jesus. It's more than a psychological state. It's a real, vibrant relationship with the living Lord of the universe. And he invites every single one of us into it. I'm going to pray and invite the worship team up before I open up the table for us. Jesus, thank you that you are in control and you actually know what you're doing. Thank you that control consists of a very simple message that Brooke shared with us on a sticker. Jesus loves you. Jesus died for you. Jesus knows what he's doing, and he's calling each and every one of us to follow him. God, remind us, revive us, recharge us in the reality that the good life is not us wrapping our arms around more control in this world, but the good life is in fact Christ and him crucified. Press that into our hearts in a way that we haven't even experienced before this week. In Jesus' name, we now pray these things. Amen.